There we go.
Wonderful. All right. Looks like we are ready to go. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the September 29th, 2023 meeting of the Mega Region Working Group. I'm glad to see you all here, and we will begin with a call to order and a roll call, please.
All right. Thank you so much, Chair Gore. As you heard, today's meeting is being recorded. If you are a member of the public and wish to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you're participating telephonically. And if you are a working group member and you're stuck in the attendee list, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll go ahead and promote you to panelist if I see it or when I see it. And then I will jump into roll call. I'm going to start with the MTC, Mayor Carol Dutra-Vernacci.
Here.
Am I saying her name correctly?
You did.
Okay, good. They just want to make sure. And then Supervisor Federal D. Glover. All right, absent. Supervisor Nate Miley. Absent. And then Jim Sparing representing Solano County and cities. Solano County.
Present.
Right. Thank you. And then going on to San Joaquin Council of Governments, Supervisor Robert Rickman.
He's currently trying to get in. He's having a little difficulty getting in.
Okay. When he gets in, I'll note it for the record. And then Mayor Gary Singh.
Here.
Thank you. And then Mayor Nancy Young.
Present.
Vice Mayor Leo Zuber.
Here.
All right. And then moving on to SACOG, Chair Gore.
Here.
Supervisor Gary Bradford.
Here.
Mayor Paul Joyner.
Here.
And Councilmember Mike Kozlowski, I believe, is absent today, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Renee. All right, well, we have a very full agenda, so I'm really glad about that. So we'll do our best to move it along. We're going to focus on Megaregion Zero Emission Vehicle Transition for Regional Transit Agencies. That's a mouthful, but we're going to hear a lot from peers about different projects and challenges and opportunities and partnerships as we try to navigate this whole initiative. There you go. So we're going to start. We need to do the approval of the remote meeting resolution, which I think you all know what that is, right? We've got to say, yes, we have a reason to meet remotely under AB 361. So Eric, is there anything you would like to say about that?
No, I think you just about covered it. So we're just looking for a vote for the resolution. This just is impacting today's meeting, not the meetings for next year.
Joyner moves approval. Bradford will second.
All right, Mr. Joyner and then Mr. Bradford, thank you. And then can we do this? Do we need to do a roll call, Renee?
We do. Yes.
All right, roll call, please.
I'll be faster this time. Okay. Mayor Carol Dutra-Vernacci.
Aye.
Supervisor Federal D. Glover. Absent. Supervisor Nate Miley. Absent. And Jim Sparing representing Solano County and cities.
Yes.
Thank you. And then Supervisor Robert Rickman. Absent still. And then Mayor Gary Singh.
Aye.
Mayor Nancy Young.
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Leo Zuber.
Yes.
Right. Chair Gore.
Here.
Supervisor Gary Bradford.
Yes.
Mayor Paul Joyner.
Yes.
And Councilmember Mike Kozlowski.
Yes, sorry.
Oh,
Oops.
that's okay. Sorry, is absent, and then motion carries.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Well, this is the person who got up really early this morning to prepare for something else, but I'm here. Before we move into as we welcome and as we kick off the meeting, I did want to just stop and acknowledge. I am sure most of us all are now aware that Senator Dianne Feinstein passed away this morning. And, you know, it's really interesting. I'm actually just finished hosting a group of women, a mentorship program for women, sort of my age, mentoring young career women and college students. And, you know, we talk about women breaking barriers, right? And that there are women who've gone before us who've broken barriers. And Senator Feinstein definitely was someone who did that. Right, the first female senator for the state of California. And then she was the first woman to chair the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Senate Rules Committee, and the first woman to be a top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. And as I look on this Zoom call, right, we have female elected officials, which was not common when Senator Feinstein became senator. So I think we have a lot to be grateful for, that we've got a lot of wonderful diversity of people representing our communities. And I think we can appreciate her contributions. So with that, let's
Chairman,
yes.
this is Supervisor Rickman, and I'm having some problem with the audio, so I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We appreciate that, and we will definitely make a note of that. All right, so as we get ready for our update, I will share a couple things. And so back in 2020, earlier this year, the Megaregion Working Group adopted a set of focus areas for 2023, and that included the topic of electric vehicles and electrification. And we last covered this topic more broadly back in September 2022, where we shared state and federal policies and opportunities for funding, while also describing initiatives in the Megaregion around zero emission vehicle deployment. The focus on regional transit agencies transitioning to zero emission vehicles was noted for further coordination at that meeting. And that topic has definitely gained some momentum this year. So it's timely that our focus of today's meeting will expand further on the efforts of our regional transit agencies. So we've invited regional partners and transit agencies to provide an overview of their current efforts to the transition to zero emission fleets. And then they'll also talk about some planning, funding, and partnerships necessary as they move forward. And several of them will discuss relevant state policies, namely the innovative Clean Transit Regulation adopted by CARB in 2018. So this will be a great opportunity to really dig a little bit deeper to understand this whole process, challenges, barriers, etc. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to James Corliss, the SACOG Executive Director, to take it from here.
Thank you, Chair Gore. Really appreciate it. As the SACOG board members know, we've had quite a bit of talk over the fuel transition, even in recent meetings, including range, technology, fuel path, emergency preparedness. If we have to evacuate, will the transit fleet have the range? But I think it's a great topic to be covered in the Megaregion, because I think, as you're going to hear about today, and we're going to have some really good speakers on this, it makes no sense for us to do this agency by agency or even region by region. This is really one where blurring those regional boundaries and even thinking about alternative fuel pathways like hydrogen and hydrogen fueling facilities across the Megaregion just makes a ton of sense. So we're really we got a good lineup of speakers today. And I think it's a great topic again for this group to be taking on. I do also just want to we're not gonna highlight it today, but I want to remind this group, as we're going through this topic on transit vehicles, we put in a joint application for the Megaregion agencies, and we're successful in getting a Caltrans planning grant to look at zero emission, medium and heavy duty vehicles, but especially on the freight side and the truck side. So we're really just kicking that off. But just as you're thinking about this today, and as a bit of a teaser, we want to come back next year and give you all updates, because especially from the heavy duty and the truck fleet perspective, we really need to be coordinating exactly where these either recharging or hydrogen fueling stations are on those long haul routes. So we're very excited about that. And I'll just say one more thing, which is we also, just within the Sacramento region, have an exciting joint board meeting coming up in November with our utility district, SMUD, our transit district, our air quality management district, where we're going to be talking a lot about these very topics and a lot of the federal funding that's available. So anyway, great topic. I think it's excellent for the mega region. Great way to end the year. And you're going to hear a lot more in this group, as I said, about that heavy duty and medium duty transition and ZEV study. So with that, I'm excited to hear our guest speakers, and back to you, Chair Gore.
Great. Thank you, James. Guess probably no questions at this point. So we're going to jump into the topic. So the mega regions, we've got the topic is the mega regions zero emission transit transition, and we've got a number of panelists and presenters. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask folks to hold questions, and we'll get them through the panel, and then we'll take questions after that. Our first presentation, we're going to welcome MTC, from MTC, Craig Bosman, and Craig Bosman is Principal Funding Policy and Programs. He's the Principal of Funding Policy and Programs, and he's going to present on the MTC Regional Zero Emission Transit Transition Study update. He'll provide a regional perspective of the progress for Bay Area transit agencies, including planning status, current deployment of efforts, risks, and opportunities for funding and collaboration. So Craig, we are going to pass it along to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Chair, for that introduction. I think you kind of said it all. So if we could get the next slide, please. So as we just mentioned, we're looking to implement the Innovative Clean Transit Rule. And we have 5 large operators in the region for whom purchase requirements are already underway under this rule. 25% of new fleet purchases need to be zero emission. We have 13 small operators in the region, and everybody has just submitted their rollout plans for the zero emission transition to CARB. And the majority of our operators have some initial zero emission deployments, whether it's a small subfleet, a pilot test, or kind of a longer standing zero emission fleet. As part of this strategy, we're also looking at the CARB commercial hovercraft regulation, which requires a transition to lower emission ferry fleets. I'm not going to focus on that too much today, but briefly, Golden Gate Ferry is looking at replacing their fleet with lower emission engines and vessels that meet the regulation. And WIDA is looking at doing something similar, which will also include some battery electric ferries. Next slide, please. So the strategy that we're implementing right now, and I do want to stress that it is in development and underway, is in partnership with transit operators and the Bay Area Regional Collaborative. And we're focused on developing the strategy that identifies challenges and opportunities at the regional and local levels, focus on both vehicles and infrastructure. Next slide, please. We have a few principles that were established at the outset. One is to transition in partnership, operators, MTC, but also the counties, the state, and the federal governments, very crucial strategy and funding partners. We want to accelerate the transition elements to focus facility investments on zero emission ready infrastructure. We want to keep in mind that we're supporting a dynamic bus system that serves local routes, key trunk corridors, and the express lane network. And we want to evaluate and manage risk throughout the transition. Next slide, please. The current status in the region, there's about 450 zero emission buses currently deployed across 12 agencies. So not every agency, but the majority of them. That represent over 10% of the region's bus fleet. A good portion of these are Muni's electric trolley buses. Those have been zero emission for a long time, but there's also 130 battery electric buses out on the road and about 40 fuel cell electric buses. So far, the chargers and the hydrogen fueling are mostly at the transit operators' depots or yards, and there's a limited number of en route chargers that are in use. Next slide, please. We've taken a look at the current agency plans, both through the rollout plans that have been submitted to CARB, additional documentation that's been sent to the Federal Transit Administration when applying for competitive grants, and through interviews. And as this rolls out across the region, we expect to see significant numbers of both battery electric and fuel cell buses. Some agencies are committed to one or the other. Some are committed to both, and others are still assessing what their fleet mix is going to look like. There's a primary focus on depot-based charging and fueling, similar to the current situation, and definitely interest in strategic on-route charging. The overall cost is being refined, but it's in the very high billions of dollars, single digits. So, if like I said, we're refining the number, but we're looking at something like 8 billion as the cost for the initial deployment of the vehicles and the infrastructure to support it. A couple of factors behind this, which we've always known is going to be a big challenge, but the vehicle costs have really inflated over the past few years. And we also have very complex facilities projects in many cases that involve, not only building out something new, but incorporating state of good repair needs, revamping really old yards, and bringing in all the power and infrastructure that is needed there. Next slide, please. We looked at a few significant risks, and I would say the two biggest are schedule and budget. So on the schedule risk, there's the risk that the timeline for the facility upgrades gets delayed. And part of that is also that the utility capacity upgrades are delayed, or that there's insufficient grid power on the required time frame to upgrade these facilities and be able to charge all the buses that they need to. On the budget, we know right now that the funding levels are insufficient at current cost projections. The gap is in the billions of dollars. And there's also a risk that that gap continues to grow as costs continue to inflate for procurement, construction, and also operating costs are not quite known. What's the cost of electricity and hydrogen and maintenance of these buses going to be? Next slide, please. We've also identified a number of collaboration opportunities, and I would say that, this is focused on the region, but a lot of these are going to be relevant within this group as well. So workforce training, knowledge sharing, vehicle purchases, joint procurements. Hydrogen procurement is a new focus that has come on, kind of arisen as part of this strategy. And I do think we're going to hear a little bit about one opportunity with Valley Link soon. And also interagency coordination for shared on-route chargers. So, whether it's a BART station, another rail hub, or just any place that more than one transit operator is coming together, if they're going to be using a location for shared charging, that, the coordination needs to be, the groundwork needs to be laid now. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit more about funding opportunities and challenges. So we typically fund the majority of buses through the FTA formula funds, which we call the Transit Capital Priorities Program. But the rapid cost escalation is causing strain. And the vehicles are the highest portion of the cost. There's also significant needs for the facilities and the chargers and overhead equipment themselves. In the region, we had recent strong performance in the FTA discretionary bus and bus facilities, as well as the LONO program, nearly 7% of the funding. But that's only 110 million. As much as it is, if we're looking at a gap in the billions of dollars, we need to continue to leverage existing state and federal transit discretionary sources. We need to start looking more at sort of non-traditional transit sources like energy and emissions-focused sources, whether it's through California Department of Energy, US departments, EPA, things like that. And we really need to realize new funding opportunities to meet this gap. Next slide, please. So as we continue to develop this strategy, we're going to be refining the cost estimate and developing the funding strategy further, looking further at the technological approaches and compatibility, the feasibility of shared infrastructure and the opportunities that may present themselves, analysis of considerations related to interoperability and emergency preparedness as the fleet types change and folks look at how do we how do we deal with this emergency response if our electric fleet is facing a downed grid? We're developing interactive maps of existing and planned locations related to this transition, and we're analyzing further the opportunities and challenge. So I think we're holding questions to the end, and that's the end of mine. So thank you, and happy to pass it on to the next.
Well, and thank you, Craig. Are there any questions? We've got a little bit of time, so I just want to see if there's any questions on what Craig just presented. And if so, you can raise your hand or just shout out. I see a hand, and that is Director Kozlowski, who is now here in case Renee didn't see that. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so you mentioned that some of the inflation of cost is relative to sort of the piling on of upgrades to facilities. Have we asked that the transit agencies discreetly separate utility upgrades from the rest? Because I think that would be a useful touch point for everybody, because that in and of itself is probably a multi-billion-dollar problem. And then secondarily, is the inflation in the vehicle costs related to everybody trying to get them at once, basically? Or is there some other issue that's affecting that pricing?
Yeah, I can say that as we are, gathering the facility costs, we are trying to break it down in terms of the various components. So, civil cost, cost of equipment, bringing in the chargers of the overhead pantographs, and certainly bringing in the energy. So as we have better
I guess
products, we're happy to share
Craig,
those.
I'm asking that we address the cost of utility upgrades like at the property line, separate from what has to happen on the given site where the charging apparatus will be, so that we can distinctly talk with the utility companies about what those costs are, because I think that funding may be different and separate. That's all.
Definitely. And other folks may have better information on the reasons behind the cost inflation of the buses. Certainly the limited industry and kind of shrinking at the moment, with American manufacturers and the massive increase in demand for zero emission buses is playing a role, as well as the general inflationary challenges throughout the economy.
Great, thank you, Craig. Looks like there are no other questions right now, so we appreciate that. We'll move to our next panel, and we're going to talk about the power of partnerships. So we've got staff from 3 regional agencies in the Sacramento area, and they're going to co-present on how they are collaborating together. So what I'm going to do, we've got Anthony Adams, Evan Spear, and Rafe Porter. And I'm going to have each of you just introduce yourselves. That way you've got the face with what they do. We'll start with Anthony, and then we'll take Evan and then Rafe. So Anthony, well, you are the Director of Planning and Grants at SAC Regional Transit. Take it away, Anthony.
Well, thank you so much. So we are the main transit provider for the Sacramento region. It's Sacramento Regional Transit, and we are trying to solve this zero emission puzzle. Next slide, please. So just to give a little bit of background, we do have the coverage all the way across the Sacramento region. Next, when we provide 90% of the transit rides within the Sacramento SACOG region. So we do provide an array of services to serve different needs and different origins and destinations. One, we have light rail, which goes east all the way to Folsom, north to Natomas, and all the way south to Elk Grove. Next. We also have commuter routes, which go in between our cities. Next. We have frequent 15-minute local service as well. Next. And we are also home to the nation's largest and one of the most productive microtransit services with Smart Ride, which is neighborhood shuttle. Next slide. And then finally, paratransit, which covers our entire service area of about 440 square miles. Next. This is just brief overview of our services. I won't go into this in detail, but just to highlight 2 things here. In the middle, it shows that more than half of our riders are low income and more than half do not own a vehicle. We take this very seriously. We are a lifeline provider, and we want to make sure that those people get to where they need to go to get to jobs. Finally, on the bottom here, we have TSA Gold Standard Award in 2019 and 2023. Only a few of these are given in the nation. We take this very seriously as well, and the safety of our system is paramount. Next slide. So this is the ICT regulations. I won't go into this detail too much either, but just to highlight, in 2029, 100% of all of our new buses and cutaways have to be zero emission. That means that we have to have all the infrastructure for those buses before 2029 comes up. Next slide. So in 2020 is when SAC-RT began our foray into battery electric buses. We bought 24 of them. And since then, we've had some experience, and not all of them has been great. The range has been an issue. So in 2023, when I started at SAC-RT, I did a second iteration of our battery electric bus feasibility study. And some of the findings that we came up with that really highlighted the need for a hydrogen feasibility study. So what did we find in that battery electric feasibility study? Next slide. We did an analysis that looked at all of our blocks. Our blocks are the routes that our buses go on. So a bus operator gets in a bus and they go on Route 81 and they drive it for 8 hours and they got to come back. That's a block. So this showed, with current battery technology, how many of those blocks would be able to be completed with a battery electric bus. So this means if a block is not completed, that bus is out of juice on the side of the road. So it is absolutely necessary that we have 100% of these blocks completed with battery electric technology, or we cannot convert. Furthermore, if you look at the bottom of this for the cutaways, these are our EV shuttles. The highest that we have at our McClellan, our downtown, is 29% of these are able to be electrified with current technology. So we've got to see either if there's a range extending option or if hydrogen will play a solution in this mix. Next slide. So these are the tasks ahead. We have over 240 full-size buses. These are the big buses, the 40-foot ones. This is going to require over 15 megawatts of new power at these facilities. That equates to 150 megawatts of power that we're going to need every single day to charge these buses. The big caveat there is our current yards have little to no capacity. And just as Director Kozlowski was just mentioning, utility costs can be a big factor in this. Just one upgrade that we have on our main lot, which is a 3.3 megawatt upgrade, is $15 million. The majority of that cost is utility upgrades. So getting a handle on these utility upgrades is essential to make sure we can get the infrastructure so we can get the batteries and the buses in there. We also have 240 cutaway shuttles that serves the Smart Ride and also the paratransit. Next. That's at 4 different locations. So we have to coordinate the electrification of 4 different locations to get these shuttles electrified. Next. We also have over 250 non-revenue vehicles. These are the trucks that go in between the stations that do the maintenance work on the tracks and on the lines, and also are the cars that our staff uses to go in between stations. Next. That's located at 9 different locations. So we have to coordinate EV charging infrastructure at 9 different locations, again, all before 2029. So the coordination with our air district and SMUD is essential. Next. So we will be looking at hydrogen feasibility. What we want to do, you can kind of just click through this with the hydrogen feasibility study. We want to look at the system capacity. How much do we need in hydrogen? How much can we do with electric? How much can we do with hydrogen? So how much hydrogen do we actually need? And with hardware, what type of hydrogen are we going to use? Are we going to convert CNG to hydrogen? Or are we going to do electrolysis? Putting electricity into water and then splitting the atom there, splitting the molecule? We need to see the cost benefits of it all. Some people just go headlong into hydrogen without saying, is it a good business decision for us to do so? There's also different ways to do hydrogen. You can produce it yourself, you can distribute it, or you can be just a consumer. So we want to make sure that the cost benefit of each of those models is understood before we move forward with how we're going to do hydrogen. We need to make sure that the technology that we're using hydrogen for is up to snuff and is affordable. Next. And also something that has been an issue with hydrogen is the pipes freeze. So you can only freeze so many buses, you can only charge so many buses at a time. So we have to make sure that the fueling that we have at the locations is sufficient and we have the space to do so. Next. Finally, where are we going to put the hydrogen and how much at each? Next. So this is not something we're pulling out of our back pocket. We do have a plan. We have a good location. This map is a little small, but I do want you to focus right south of the orange square there. That's I-80. So our location is less than a mile away from I-80. We do hope this location will be of regional significance, and we could possibly be a fueling location for inner city buses or medium to heavy duty vehicles as well. So this site right now is McClellan site, BMF2. Click one more time. This space that's right there in green is currently a CNG facility. So it's currently a shared CNG facility that school buses and also the waste facility comes and fuels up their trucks there, their heavy duty trucks. So it could just be converted to a hydrogen fueling facility. And it's something that we could do with other organizations, other transit operators, and possibly we could be a regional solution. Another side here, this building that's right south of that green square, that's all sawtooth roof. That's about 1.5 megawatts of solar potential, which would provide about enough hydrogen for about 15 buses. So it's possible not only to convert CNG at this location, but to maybe do electrolysis as well. But what we have to do is that feasibility study to see what is the proper model for us to go after. Next. So these are our next steps. Just click through here. We have to confirm what our fuel mix is going to be. How much electricity, how much hydrogen, what's the proper business decision for us to make going forward. We have to coordinate all this and then coordinate with our partner agencies, the Air District and SMUD, to fund these. And then we got to install them. And then after we install this infrastructure, then can we buy more buses? Those 24 buses that we have, they have maxed out our existing electrical capacity. We cannot put more buses in our fleet that are electric until we upgrade our infrastructure. So the partnership is essential here in the SACOG region. Thank you. And I think I'm going to turn it over to,
Evan Spear,
Thank you so much.
Senior Strategic Business Planner, SAC Municipal Utilities District. And thank you, Anthony. And oh my goodness, I just have to say. So as we're digging in, I'm thinking, how in the world is this actually going to get accomplished? So with that, Evan, your turn.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Anthony, for kicking this off. Evan Spear, SMUD, Senior Strategic Business Planner. I focus on electric vehicles and specifically our commercial segment. So our fleets, our workplaces, our multifamily housing properties, figuring out just how we are going to solve this challenge of getting power where it's needed and when it's needed, right? So I wanted to briefly talk about our role in supporting RT's fleet electrification plans, as well as just kind of our broader role in supporting all of our fleet customers' electrification plans. And I wanted to point back to kind of a number that Anthony threw out there, the 15 megawatts of power, and put that in perspective, right? 15 megawatts of power, 5 megawatts of power is typically what you see from a large outdoor sports arena. So take Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, and then throw 3 of those right in a service territory for that 15 megawatts of power. I mean, that's a massive project. These are massive projects, capacity upgrade projects for utilities to undertake to get that amount of power to these fleet depots that we've really haven't done before, right? Our building electrification plans, those are all pretty incremental, and we can plan for those. We can plan for new development and plan for getting power to these new development sites as the construction is occurring. But the timelines for fleet electrification, as you saw in Anthony's presentation, they're tight. And fleets are purchasing or putting in orders for vehicles right now, and they're getting those vehicles in 6 to 9 months. And then, but our infrastructure upgrade timeline is 2 to 3 years, maybe for certain sites. So really kind of matching up those timelines is extremely important. And then, as Anthony noted, working in partnership with each other. Next slide, please. So what are we doing? First, at a really high level, we're planning. It seems simple. We have a whole planning department at SMUD. This is what they do. But for transportation electrification, it's complicated. It's hard to plan for something that is just starting, that we don't know a lot about. You heard Anthony and previous presenters talk about the mix of fuel that will be used for their zero-emission vehicle buses. Well, when we're planning, we need to know what that mix of fuel is. We need to know how many buses are going to be hydrogen fuel cell buses. We need to know how many are going to be battery electric buses. That changes the equation significantly in planning for our grid capacity upgrades. We also need to know how many trucks and buses have home bases here in our service territory. how fast will these fleets transition? We know advanced clean fleets and ICT, we know those have deadlines. We know what those deadlines are. What we're seeing from a lot of customers is they're moving faster than those deadlines. We have fleets in our service territory that have internal sustainability goals, and they want to deploy these vehicles ahead of those targets. And then others may be lagging behind and may seek exemptions. Who and where are most impactful fleets? SAC-RT being one of them. And is our grid ready for the load? And then not lastly, I think just as important is we're ready for this transition. Do we have the staff? Do we have the electrical technicians and the electricians to be able to do this kind of work, and the ones that are EVITP certified to install these chargers at these sites? So next slide. So the grid, as you all know, is a shared resource. And so to plan to get answers to a lot of these questions, not all of them, but a lot of these questions, in 2022, SMUD conducted a medium and heavy duty blueprint study. I think Executive Director Corliss talked about this at the front of this meeting, one being conducted for the Megaregion. SMUD led an effort for SMUD service territory, similar. So looking at who those fleets are, what are our top 100 fleets or top fleets in our service territory? Where do they have depots? What do we expect in terms of fleet electrification? And what is the impact, projected impact of that electrification on our grid? And there are really three pieces of information that came out of that. One, about 100 fleets in our service territory are projected to have about 90% of the load that hits our distribution grid, which is good news for us because we have a small pool, a relatively small pool that we can focus on and plan for to try and meet all of the distribution grid and capacity requirements that are going to come over. The challenge with that is that's very high concentration of load at individual depot sites, right? Which strains that feeder, that circuit, that substation. So it's a lot, like the 15 megawatts of power that's going to be needed. Two, the second thing we identified is where we have areas of opportunity to add load to our grid. So as you can see, these green areas, that's where we have kind of like a stoplight. Green means go. There's capacity there. Yellow is like, maybe it depends. Red's like, whoa, stop. We don't have any capacity. We're really going to need to do some significant upgrades. So we were able to identify those places so that we can work with our fleet partners to strategically locate their charging equipment where we can kind of move it around, where it doesn't need to be at a specific depot. Maybe there are a few locations within our service territory, picking the right one that has the capacity to support. And then third, what we learned is how advanced technologies can be used to mitigate some of these constraints that we see on our distribution grid from both the customer and a grid perspective. So the two maps that you see are basically the same scenario in 2035. One is just using a managed peak scenario. This is assuming that these large fleets are using some sort of automated load management software. They're optimizing their charging around our demand charges, our time of use rates, shifting that load or minimizing that load off of our peak times. It makes a huge difference. It cuts the peak load by about 40% by 2040. You can see the difference in color on these maps, frees up a lot more capacity. This is shared capacity, frees up a lot more ability for fleets to electrify without having to do major infrastructure.
Hey, Evan, one more minute.
Got it. Next slide. Second thing that we're doing is collaboration, and this has been kind of the theme so far. I think Rafe will talk about kind of the 4-agency partnership a little bit more, but we are heavily involved in working with SACOG, AQMD, SAC-RT, in developing this regional zero-emission vehicle deployment strategy that identified funding needs as well as kind of shared infrastructure needs. Second, strategic site selection. Our grid is it is it changes from neighborhood to neighborhood. As you can see on that image in the middle, you can have a site that's 2 blocks away from another site that has capacity, and 2 blocks down the road there isn't. Just depends what feeder is on. So really working hand in hand with SAC-RT to identify those locations and those opportunities for deployment of charging infrastructure. Right sizing charging. One of the things we do, we have an e-fuel advisor program. It's free of service for all fleets, large fleets. And basically we advise on the type of equipment and the type of technologies to keep those peak loads down, to reduce those demand charges, and to reduce the need for capacity upgrades. Next slide. And lastly, financial support. We've also heard this stuff is expensive, both the infrastructure upgrades, as well as the vehicles, as well as the EVSE. We provide quite a few incentives all across the board, from light duty all the way up to class 8, also for stub outs, transformer upgrades, panel upgrades. I will say every large utility receives low carbon fuel standard credits. These credit revenues have to be used for transportation electrification purposes. This money needs to be used for this type of stuff. So if you have large projects, reach out to your utilities, see if they have excess LCFS funding to be able to fund some of these large infrastructure upgrade projects that you're seeing. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Evan. Appreciate that very much. And looks like Paul has a question. So I'll let you ask the question, Paul, before I turn it on over to Rafe. So go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate that. Just very quickly, we've talked a great deal about distribution of energy, but we haven't really talked at all about generation and capacity. Do we have the sufficient generation to meet the needs moving forward in the future, not just of the transit fleets, the commercial fleets, but the private fleets as well? And I've seen nothing in the last few years that suggests that we are moving aggressively to adding new generation, significant generation, to the grid.
Sure, it's a great question. It's a great question. And obviously I can only speak for SMUD. I can't speak for the other utilities. And we have our own generation assets for our service territory. And the short answer to your question is yes, we believe we have enough generation to meet the transportation electrification needs of the near future. It's included in our zero carbon plan, which is our plan to move to zero carbon by 2030, decarbonize our grid and all of our generation sources by 2030. These numbers of 27,000 medium and heavy duty vehicles, 288,000 light duty EVs in our service territory, all factored into that zero carbon plan and accounted for with new renewable resources, generation resources that we plan to bring on.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Director Spearing.
Thank you. Evan, have you made a decision on what percentage will be electric and which will be hydrogen or alternative fuel?
Have we made a decision on in kind of our modeling and forecasting? Is that the question?
Yeah, the last question here about how reliable the network's going to be. Electric is subject to terrorism, infrastructure failure. I mean, a lot of demand. So there needs to be some alternative fuel. You had mentioned that part of your fleet's going to be hydrogen. Have you made a decision what percentage of it would be other than electric?
So when talking about fleets, I'm sorry to clarify, I'm talking about kind of fleets in our service territory, not necessarily SMUD's fleet.
Right. Yes.
And so in our modeling, we have a certain percentage. I don't know what that percentage is offhand that we assume will be hydrogen fuel cell powered vehicles. Now, what actually plays out on the ground, whether the cost per kilogram of hydrogen can come down to a point where fleets really start adopting that technology en masse, if we can get the fueling infrastructure out there, that may change that equation. We built in kind of assumptions based on national modeling of hydrogen adoption. Again, I don't know what those are offhand, but just kind of what's out there in the studies and what's been kind of looked at already.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Evan. All right, we'll move on to Rafe Porter, and Rafe is with the SAC Metropolitan Air Quality Management District. He's Transportation and Climate Change Program Manager.
Great. Thank you, Director Gore, and good afternoon, everyone. Rafe Porter with SAC Metro Air District. Both Evan and Anthony talked a lot about partnerships, and so I'm going to focus a little bit on that. And then, as you can tell, based on the scale that they both talked about, that this isn't going to come cheap or free. So I'll talk a little bit more on the money side. So when we started to see all of this coming down, state mandates, what is it going to mean at the local level? We sat down with our 4 partners. So we sat down with SACOG, we sat down with Sacramento Regional Transit, sat down with SMUD and the Air District and said, all right, what does this transition to zero emission future look like? And what do we need to be focused on? We created, based on those conversations, and it was quite a few conversations, created a zero emission deployment strategy. So what is it going to take in the region to do that? And we came up with 4 pillars. The first one, which we're talking about today, is how do we transition our transit fleet to that? Second was looking at goods movement, so the medium and heavy duty sector and what it's going to take to move that sector. Third is e-mobility, so things like mobility hubs and car share and just the cars that we're all driving, and making sure that we've got charging or fueling infrastructure for the hydrogen out there is the third. And the fourth is, and Evan alluded to this, is workforce development. If we're going to put all of this infrastructure in the ground, let's make sure that we've got a workforce that's trained and ready to do that. Next slide, please. So focusing specifically on the transition to fleets, as I said, this is not going to be cheap. So just looking at what it was going to take to move SAC-RT to zero emission in their fleet, it was looking like it was going to cost just a little over $500 million. So that $540 million, that number is probably going to go up over time, but we're starting to make inroads in putting a dent in that number as we speak. Anthony alluded to, all the different cutaways and large buses they have, and the fleet is over 600 buses. Not only are you going to have to transition those buses, though, so it's not only the vehicle stock, but you're going to need the infrastructure there as well. You're going to need the garages to work on that. You're going to need the yards to be able to charge and work on those vehicles. So again, working with these 4 agencies, looking at what kind of capacity are in those existing areas that SAC-RT is working in their yards, or in using the map that Evan put together, looking at where there are other opportunities for these yard spaces. And then obviously SAC-RT doesn't exist in a bubble. There are other transit agencies that operate within Sacramento County. So looking at where there's opportunities to kind of partner on some of those charging opportunities as well. And then the last thing we needed to look at with that is, what is the impact going to be in the community, or where is that going to really affect these neighborhoods? So we want to make sure that we're putting infrastructure in places. We want to make sure that transit infrastructure and transit services are available in these underserved and disadvantaged communities, and make sure that, again, we're having building a workforce that's going to be able to work on that long term. Next slide, please. So what we came up with was, again, kind of working in the SAC-RT model, is kind of a distributed system, if you will. So making sure that we've got their 3 garages or these 3 depots of charging available, but make sure that there's also on-route charging, so that there's opportunities, if they're out and about with a bus, that there are fueling or charging opportunities out there. Again, making sure that their garages and their depots are not only set up for electric, but also for hydrogen as well. Anthony did a great job of kind of outlining what some of those opportunities were. And getting to that previous question, and the Air District just hosted a hydrogen summit yesterday, where we had a lot of professionals from around the country coming in to talk about the opportunities from hydrogen. A lot of them were saying that for the shorter routes, that there's not a huge amount of cargo, electricity is probably the better fuel. But maybe for the longer hauls, or if there's a lot of cargo needed with that. So again, whether it's maybe some of the larger buses, or goods movement on the heavy duty side, the hydrogen might be a better way. And so we're really looking at working with RT on both of those fuels, and we're approaching this from a fuel agnostic standpoint. And then again, making sure that the location for these is sufficient not only for SAC-RT, but for other transit agencies as well. And then I put a little timeline on the right just to kind of give you a sense of where we're at. We're really starting in the planning phases now. We're starting to do some community outreach. We're already working on some of that grid work, and you heard Evan, give a good update on where SMUD's at with that. We are also working on the hydrogen side. The Air District has already funded 2 heavy-duty stations for hydrogen for vehicles, and again, we're working with SMUD on what they could do on the transit side, and all of this to hit these goals by 2045. Last slide, please. And then this is really where the Air District, I think, comes in to help in a big way. So not only on the planning and partnership, but we do have incentive dollars that we give out. So last year alone, we had over $18 million in funds that we gave for projects like on-road trucks and buses, for off-road equipment like agricultural and construction equipment, as well as the infrastructure, so charging and hydrogen fueling stations as well. And we do use a bunch of different sources from federal, state, and even some local funds that we put in together. That $18 million is just, obviously just a small scratch on that $540 million that we put up there, but I think it does help and really underscore what we've all been talking about today as a partnership, that it's really going to take all of us moving forward together. So while we're investing $18 million now, we're going to have another pot of funds in the next year and the next year and the next year, and we'll continue to work with SMUD, RT, and SACOG to move this forward. I think that's the end of my presentation. I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafe. Really appreciate that. Do we have any questions for Rafe or any additional questions for Evan or Anthony? Before you raise the hand icon or speak up. All right. I do not see anything. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I don't know, for me, it's like oh my, lots and lots of work to be done. And right, then the question is, where's the money and will we have the power? But hey, that's why we have all you. Okay. We will move next. Our next presentation is Will, and I believe it's Ritter. He's the Deputy Director of the Tri-Valley San Joaquin Valley Regional Rail Authority, and he's going to present on the Valley Link Hydrogen Vision. So with that, Will, I will allow you to take it away.
Great, and thank you, Chair Gore and members of the working group. Again, Will Ritter, Deputy Director of the Tri-Valley San Joaquin Valley Regional Rail Authority. And just want to note that we really do appreciate the opportunity to share our hydrogen vision with you all today, and recognize, the unique opportunity with regards to the theme of collaboration, throughout the Megaregion on these types of initiatives. And I'd say that it's a very exciting time, from a standpoint with regards to the advancement of hydrogen vehicle technology, whether we look at buses, rail vehicles, or trucks, and then of course the overall kind of excitement around the green hydrogen economy here in California, as these kind of considerations with production use are being advanced in a real statewide initiative here to pursue a significant amount of money out of the federal hydrogen hub program. Next slide, please. So as many of you may be familiar with, the Valley Link rail project itself is a 42-mile new passenger rail service that's looking to connect the East Bay with the San Joaquin Valley. And as you'll see here, the map of what we're looking to be able to accomplish with the project, with both the initial operating phase going from the Dublin-Pleasanton BART system out to our first station in San Joaquin County at Mountain House, and then the future to be able to continue that on to North Lathrop. What I did want to do is use this as a way to call attention to the Tracy Operations and Maintenance Facility, which is what we see as a very unique opportunity through the commitment of 200 acres from the city of Tracy to the project to be able to not only serve the needs of our system from, again, the operations and maintenance standpoint, but also a property that has the potential to be developed in a way to generate renewable on-site energy. And I also note that relative to the geography, it is adjacent to one of the largest logistics development under Prologis, which is just to the west of us. And then, of course, you can see here close to other local transit operators, Livermore and Amador Valley Transit Authority that operates out of the city of Livermore, the city of Tracy that has their own bus service, and then others, including up in Stockton with the San Joaquin Regional Transit District. And all those operators are now actively either moving into hydrogen buses or exploring those through pilot projects. Next slide, please. So as a part of our economic and environmental sustainability vision, we've taken seriously not only how we need to be operating the most environmentally sustainable system with zero emission technology, but really a focus on the economics of how we are going to be providing cost-effective service. And as many are familiar with, operations is sometimes the most challenging side of public transportation systems. And so we have been looking seriously at hydrogen as a way to not only be able to support our direct needs for green renewable energy, but also as a way to be able to actually lower our cost of operations by producing excess and sell to other users, whether those be other transit operators or to the private sector, as I noted before, with logistics and recognizing a demand that is going to be growing with regards to not only actual truck vehicles, but also things like forklifts that are operating in significant numbers in a lot of those logistics facilities. And so from our standpoint, this concept of self-production of hydrogen presents an opportunity for us to be able to offset our cost of operations and ultimately, the other types of, subsidies that are being directed to transit services. Next slide. So some of the things that we've been kind of looking at from a pragmatic approach, of course, in the conversation about hydrogen is the availability of the vehicle technology. And I think we've been very focused on being able to leverage existing investments that have been occurring and really being led by the state of California in this regard. The vehicle that you see here is the two-car hydrogen flirt vehicle that actually, as I believe this morning, was delivered to the U.S. by Stadler. And so these are the kind of considerations that we're looking at with regards to, the availability of the technology, the ability of the technology to actually not only support our environmental and economic sustainability goals, but also where, we need to meet certain kind of requirements, for the eligibility for federal funding. And of course, we're looking at things like resiliency and how we deal with, the potential, of other types of things we've been talking about here, issues with, providing different types of power through the existing grid and the like, and where hydrogen presents an opportunity to be able to most effectively manage that. And just a note here with this type of vehicle that we're looking at, it's a modular vehicle. And we are in fact looking at a 4-car kind of version of the 2-car flirt vehicle that has arrived to the US. And this is very similar to what the California State Transportation Agency has entered into an MOU with Stadler for, which will be targeted, to our understanding, to be operating in the Central Valley in the future. Next slide, please. So as a part of our vision, we have kind of taken the vision to the kind of development of a feasibility study that looked at self-production and the economics of that was adopted by our board in September of 2022. In that timeline is where also the state stood up their kind of overall, what they call the Arches Initiative, which is focused on developing a collaboration of leveraging over $1 billion of federal funding to establish California as a site for a green hydrogen hub. And then as a part of that, to be able to prepare ourselves to be considered as a part of the Arches, we brought on a private sector partner with Lindy North America in December, and subsequently submitted a formal application to the Arches Initiative in December. And I just note that as a part of the feasibility studies where we recognized through this process, the value of bringing private sector expertise, into this kind of area, and subsequently where we also determined a value in pursuing legislation to be able to support us in being able to bring on a private sector partner within kind of existing California requirements. Next slide. So this just gives an overview of our proposal to Arches. And I think key thing I just want to recognize here is really focused on a distributed model of hydrogen production. You might hear this terminology, in relationship to kind of centralized production, but as we noted before, what we're looking at relative to some of the issues just simply being able to transport hydrogen is to be looking at production closer to where the use would actually occur. And while there's a lot of kind of focus right now and looking longer term about repurposing some of the existing gas pipelines to be able to transport hydrogen in the future, I think the reality is today that that is going to be occurring by heavy truck. And, this is where, we see, again, this opportunity to be able to look at a production facility that is sized for kind of our immediate need, as well as what we'll be looking at as far as excess sale to other kind of industries, but also just recognizing that with this form of hydrogen production focused on electrolytic kind of technology, that it is scalable and something that we can build up as we move forward in time. Next slide. So SB 746 is the piece of legislation that we have been very appreciative of the support from the state legislature, where we now have it pending the governor's signature to be able to add us as an eligible public agency, as well as electrolytic hydrogen as an eligible form of alternative energy to the existing Energy Conservation Code, which would provide us all the tools to be able to kind of take renewable energy to produce electrolytic hydrogen, not only for our purposes, but also to sell to other users, and most importantly, to be able to do so with private sector partners that, again, we look to leverage their expertise to be able to not only stand this type of facility up, but to operate and maintain. Next slide. And then again, back on the theme of collaboration, following a number of, let's say, very successful events that we've had in the Tri-Valleys, as well as conversations with what we see are kind of key partners in this space, including a number of the operators that I mentioned before. We're looking to advance this concept of a hydrogen collaborative with a number of those partners that, this is noted in some of the other presentations, really looking at where there's a value of solidarity around these types of initiatives and trying to leverage kind of the private sector expertise in certain areas to be able to promote kind of public sector kind of organizational capacity around it, support one another as we are pursuing different types of discretionary grants to advance the conversion to fleets, as well as how we can be able to supply hydrogen to private users, as well as potentially even the public, at some of these different types of fueling stations that can be made available to the public. And then, of course, again, looking at where we can coordinate on purchases, as well as down at the bottom, focus on, how we can promote career pathways with local businesses, labor, and educational partners, with, of course, in that green focus. Next slide. And that ends my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Will, very much. Any questions for Will? So I have a question, and sorry if it's not well informed. I'm sitting here overlooking our rail yards, Union Pacific Rail Yards here in Roseville, and we've got some exciting announcement about some funding that we're getting from the state or the feds, and really exciting, right, about transit or rail transit. And so you guys are looking at, you've got the Valley Link, right? And you're looking at actually using hydrogen to provide for those vehicles, right? To use hydrogen along the way, right? That would be the goal. And I think about, like, I'm sure I love to know the cost on that. But you're pretty much are you pretty much like a pilot project in doing this? Are there other models of that? And as I think about, is somebody to say the way you need to do it here and the SACOG region is to use hydrogen. I'm just looking at this going, what would that cost? How do people learn from you? How, I don't know. I'm just thinking maybe we're going to have to use, hydrogen so that we have renewable vehicles as we transport people between Roseville and Sacramento. But I don't know, just spitballing here.
So I would just note, and it was a great question, that back to the slide as far as where we're looking to leverage existing, investment from the state in this technology is that two-car vehicle that I showed is actually going to be delivered to the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority here in the coming months. And so it's kind of going through a progression of, testing, within the US to be able to make sure that it addresses, things like Federal Railroad Administration compliance and the like. But it will be soon operating on the Redlands Aero project, which is a 9-mile kind of passenger railway down in San Bernardino County. And then that vehicle has been developed in a way where it could actually operate over a longer type of corridor, if that is ultimately what transpires, with some of the other kind of larger kind of passenger rail connectivity in the greater LA.
So it's an opportunity to learn, see how it works, correct?
That's exactly it. And we're trying to make sure, again, that we're closely communicating with some of the different teams that are working, not only, on the vehicle, but how it's going to be, stored, how it's going to be fueled, all those kind of considerations with regard to some of the perceptions of, safety around hydrogen.
Yeah. And of course, you've got to have the infrastructure for the hydrogen, right? Really important. You got to be able to do that. But then the cost of the vehicle, how different is it than what you might buy for current uses of transit?
So I'd say at this point in time, I can't speak into all the details, as we're going through, but I think what we're trying to look at is the opportunity to be able to consider how we can take advantage of these larger type of procurements that are going on. So there are already 4-car, flirt vehicles that are in the States and operating in, as we note, the modular vehicle configurations. In the middle is what you see is called the propulsion pack. And so that's the beauty of these type of vehicles, is the fact that there are versions of these that are operating with a diesel propulsion system, and then others is noting here that that propulsion pack is now being transitioned to hydrogen fuel cell.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate that
Sure.
very much. Any other questions? Right, then we will we'll move next to Adam Hansen, and Adam is a planning manager. He's with the Yuba Sutter Transit District, and he'll present on next generation transit facility. So take it away, Adam.
I will. Thank you. It's good to be here. As you can see, we're a small urban agency. We're 45 minutes north of Sacramento. And this is one of our busiest days here. The opening slide, that's the Seek Festival. It's on November 5th. You're all invited to come. We transport more people that day than any other day of our service here. Approximately 30,000 people go to that festival using our service. So we can, from there, let's go to the next slide. As I said, we're small urban. This is our current yard. We have 51 buses. We operate commuter, fixed route, and dial ride service with a few rural routes mixed in there. Between all the services, we have a few different sized buses, as you can see from the aerial image. And this is the space constraints we were faced with when the ICT rule passed. And we thought, how would we add chargers or anything more to this site than we already have sandwiched in this site? We have the railroad tracks to the west and the Highway 70 to the east, which currently is being expanded. And they're increasing the height distance of the overcrossing right there to the north of us. So they have to reline the tracks. So further limiting our space that we have on site. So this is just kind of the reality of what is faced by transit agencies when they're forced to adopt a whole new fuel, whole new propulsion system. And so I'm going to go through and kind of take you on the journey that we had to go through to start our transition. And it's just starting, but it hasn't been easy, but we're off to a really good start. So with that, we go to the next slide. So first thing, we got a Caltrans adaptation planning grant. And we looked at a 30-year horizon of where we could move, where we're going to find a site that meets our needs. And here's some of the things we considered there on the slide. But we definitely wanted it to be able to use hydrogen or electric as fuel, and also be able to deliver alternative transportation models. A lot of people are moving to smaller on-demand buses, so you need smaller parking spaces instead of large parking spots for like big commuter buses and fixed route. And we are doing that transition as well, becoming more smaller and more nimble, providing more specialized service. Go on to the next slide. So the site we picked, that we purchased back in 21 is 19.2 acres. That's a big difference from the 3.2 that we're on now. And this is just like a draft layout that we did to show that it could fit. And it was zoned appropriately, and the surrounding uses were great. So we went and go ahead and bought it. And that has been a blessing, as we've been able to show that's a feasible project. And I'll get to funding later on, but it's been a good benefit to get funding, already having the site on hand. And lastly, located in a disadvantaged community, that doesn't hurt at all. Go ahead, next slide. So one thing we're really excited about is the potential to produce clean energy on site. I say we don't need all 19.2 acres. Our feasibility study showed we only need about 10 acres to do it, but the price was right and the property was available. So this is just one rendition that we had the consultant prepare for us to say, hey, if it did pencil out to put solar on a majority of the property, how much could we produce? What would that entail? And they did that. And as you see, 2.15 megawatts, which if you follow the math there, it could potentially power our buses, a fixed route bus for 1.5 million miles. True, the devil's in the details, the storage distribution, when we charge versus when the power is produced is all what we have to figure out. But that we'll get a consultant, some good people, the smartest minds to help us figure that out. But we are excited about the potential. Also, we have a Costco opening up October 5th with half a mile to the west, with a Walmart there is also. And so I will also talk about a mobility hub option 2. You go on the next slide. And so that's just kind of the rendition we used for grant applications. As you can see, there's a lot of empty space in front. That's what I was talking about, mobility hub, perhaps battery electric vans, bikes, and other things, because the commercial district, like I said, is about quarter to half mile to the west of there. So we are definitely excited. The energy transformers you see there, that extra space, we are leaving it open for the potential for hydrogen. I know SACOG is doing the study about heavy duty hydrogen facilities and whatnot. So we are looking for partners to perhaps partner on something. We're a too small agency to really take on and have the need for a standalone hydrogen system at the limited number of buses that we do have. As we don't probably only use it for our more heavy duty buses, which we only have, 22 fixed route buses and 13 commuter buses. So 35 buses is probably not enough to support a hydrogen fueling station. We've also looked at public-private, where we also have considered public-private partnerships and leasing out perhaps a few acres of our land. If they produce, fuel and hydrogen for us or stored it for us to fuel from, then we could lease them land and we have a dual use on that property. So definitely throwing around many ideas. We'll be looking forward to some of those studies as they progress to find partnerships and to further develop our ideas in our site. Go ahead, next slide. Just real quick, these are just the main funding sources we've gotten so far. The Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Grant was our first major win, and we worked with our local housing agency to partner on that, and that has been a blessing, as that was our first funding to show that it's a feasible project and that it is fundable. So I think with that momentum, we're able to get other grants. And the most recent one was the SACOG Maintenance and Modernization Grants. I want to thank them for that, as we are well on our way to being fully funded. We're just starting the environmental process now, and we already have about 3/4 of the funding we need for the project, which is phenomenal. But for a small agency, a $55 million project is quite substantial, considering our budget on an annual basis is about 8. It's almost get to 9 million. But we have a $55 million to build the facility with the charging infrastructure and everything we need to roll out zero emission buses, because we cannot roll out zero emission buses without the facility. And thankfully, the TIRCP funding that we got, we're going to be able to purchase 16 zero emission buses that will coincide with moving into the facility. So from close to day one, we'll be using the power that we install, using the infrastructure, and implementing battery electric buses into our system. But until then, we're just going to stay where we are, use our current vehicles until we get this new facility, because we don't want to invest or put in charging infrastructure or do the major upgrades needed in a current facility, as that would not be cost advantageous to our system. And with that, I believe we're just looking forward to the future and looking forward to getting started in our design and build something that's definitely going to serve the public and provide better transportation, clean transportation up here in the Yuba and Sutter County bi-county area. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Adam. Appreciate that. Questions? Any questions from my colleagues? Either of Adam, Will, or any others as we sort of wrap up all the conversation about these different projects. I need to open this up to the public, so any public comment, I want to make sure I do that as well. Any questions from the public? And raise your hands over there.
We do not have any public comment.
All right. Well, thank you all. You know, it's clear that these are, I guess I'd say these are big projects, right? Aspirational in the fact that it's not easily to implement. Y'all are working really hard in many different ways to figure out how to actually do this. Public-private partnerships, trying to leverage existing resources, be creative. It's a whole new world out there, and I appreciate you all working on what you're working on. To me, it's really eye-opening how much work it is taking to get to a place where we would be zero net neutral. How do I say that? But it's going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So I have a skeptic hat, but then I listen to you all and I go, well, at least we have people who have can-do attitudes. So for that, I'm very grateful. So thank you all for joining us today. All right, then with that, we are going to move to item number 5, which is our funding update. And we're going to get an update on some Megaregion dozen projects. We have some exciting news about some projects. And so with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Dustin Foster. He is with SACOG. He's the Transportation Planning and Megaregion. Well, he's a transportation planner and he's our Megaregion staff. So with that, Dustin, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. And for this being the last meeting, it's just been an honor to support this group, to staff this group all year. So thank you, and looking forward to the meetings in the future. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt real quickly. Supervisor Rickman is in the attendees list. Can someone join him to the panel? My apologies.
Thank you, Diane. I will go ahead and do that. I appreciate you letting me know.
Wonderful. Great. Well, yeah, and as the chair had noted, I'll just be providing a brief update on funding activities for the Megaregion dozen projects. So just, really, we've presented on the Megaregion dozen project list pretty much each meeting this year. So this shouldn't, be news for anybody. But for context, it's a list of 12 transportation project priorities across the Megaregion region. They are listed here. With 4 projects each from SACOG, NTC, and SJCOG. These projects really include, a number of different project types, whether they're highway managed lanes or interchange improvements, passenger rail improvements. We just heard from Valley Link providing on their hydrogen vision, as well as freight improvements. We support these as Megaregion staff. In terms of advocacy, we have an informational brochure which we update, which is the title page is pictured on the left here. We provide letter support and other guidance, expertise, and just project tracking. So let's jump in. In our last meeting in April, we had discussed a number of pending opportunities for the 12 projects. Over the summer, we heard some great news. So, directors, representatives, if you want to raise your hand and be excited about some of these wins, feel free to jump in. But from the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, we saw 3 of the Megaregion dozen projects were funded. 2 of them from MTC, the I-80 westbound truck scales replacement, received $129 million, completing, not to bury the lead, completing its funding need. And then the Port of Oakland Green Power Microgrid received $42 million, also completing its funding need. Here in our region, the I-5 the SACOG region, the I-5 Sacramento Madge lanes received 10 million for early phase engineering work. So really exciting stuff. I don't know if any of the working group members or folks would want to express excitement over these projects, or I'll move on to the next slide.
There's excitement. They're just being quietly excited. How about that?
Great. Yeah, I can see all the folks. So if there's cheers and things like that, please let me know. All right, I'll move on to the next. Oh, okay. I saw one there. All right, next slide. So specific to the Capital Corridor, we have this titled as Capital Corridor Awards. There were a number of pending rail funding programs that we had presented on at our April meeting, including the SB1 Solutions for Congested Corridor Program, although that's not rail specific, and the Federal Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program, CRISI. So as you can see here, a lot of success for this project. It received 25 million as part of a 50 million total corridor request, which also included a $25 million award for the Sacramento Valley Light Rail Station realignment. So realigning the light rail at the Sacramento Valley Station, very critical key transit improvements in our region. The CRISI award, it was literally announced formally earlier this week. We had to change up our slides, and we're even more excited to hear that. So yeah, that really for phase one of the project, building that third track between Sacramento and Roseville, and a number of other improvements related to that. 67.5 million awarded over this summer, and I think that fully funds phase one. But I think we have some folks here. I know Chair Gore is excited, so I'll if anyone wants to say anything, I'll pause for a moment for any comments.
Well, and thank you, Dustin, and really a big deal to get that additional $42 million for this to fully fund, I believe, the first phase of the Capital Corridor, allowing additional rail between Roseville and into Sacramento. Just a really big deal. And I'll tell you, this project has been on the books for like 20 years. So to actually get to this place is fabulous. And I have to say that what's really exciting is here we've got 4 projects, right, of our Megaregion dozen, where working together and lobbying together, I think, has definitely had an impact. And we talked a lot when we came to Sacramento to lobby on transportation earlier this year. We talked a lot about rail projects, and look what's happened, right? And then some of the other projects in the Bay Area, like really good wins. So thank you. I want to say thank you to everyone for just your willingness to partner together. I think it really does make a difference. And so with that, it looks like I've got something from Director Sparing. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, I just want to echo your comments. Having the truck scales, especially on the Megaregion list, made a difference. When all the meetings that we had, and we had quite a few meetings on that project, everybody was impressed that the region, the Megaregion, endorsed that project, which is in the heart of Solano County. And but I just want to stress the importance that this group made in accomplishing that goal of getting that money for that project.
Absolutely, I agree. Dustin, I want to make sure you finish your presentation before I open it up to public comment. So do you have anything else
Yes,
to share with us?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Just a few more slides, and we had noted, right? So just for confirmation, for celebration, these 2 projects that were noted earlier, but specifically again, the I-80 westbound truck scales replacement and the Port of Oakland Green Power microgrid have been confirmed for full funding. These would be the first 2 Megaregion dozen projects to achieve that very significant goal of moving on to construction. It's the new Megaregion dozen list that we're creating of those projects that are fully funded and moving on. So yeah, I think this is absolutely, Chair Gore, something that the Megaregion, this working group, has supported and to help accomplish and move it forward. So this also provides us a great opportunity, right? So really, simple, for us here, project adoption process. We had discussed, amongst the 3 agencies here on what to do. The branding is really strong. The Megaregion dozen. You can't have 10 projects on a Megaregion dozen. You could have a Megaregion's Baker's dozen with 13, but in any event, so this provides an opportunity to adopt 2 new projects to add to the list for the MTC group specifically. We worked, directly again with MTC to have this process agreed upon. So here at this meeting, we're providing the full funding confirmation, that first little step here. And so next, MTC has kind of a major advancements, major project advancements policy related to this that they can consult as they look, and use their process to find those next 2 projects. And so, they will determine that. And then they will come forward in an upcoming Megaregion working group meeting, to present on those 2 projects to be approved by the working group next year, to add those 2 new projects. So that's the process that we're proposing. Really, stop there if there's any guidance, any response.
Great, thank you, Dustin. Any questions from directors before I open it up to the public? All right, doesn't look like it, but I do have Jim Allison who has raised his hand. So Renee, if you can make that happen, that'd be great.
Absolutely. All right, Jim, you are able to make your public comment.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Jim Allison. I'm the manager of planning with Capital Corridor, and I just wanted to express the deepest thanks for all the MPOs and for supporting this whole concept of mega regional projects. We believe it is this kind of support that the Federal Railroad Administration notices, the DOT recognizes this, and we think it was instrumental in securing this grant. So we have phase 2 to move ahead with. We're going to keep this on the list if we can, please, but we're very excited to get phase 1 fully funded to move ahead now. And we had a kickoff meeting, not a meeting, but a celebration really today with the Deputy FRA Administrator in Roseville, right at the Roseville station. So we would welcome you to, it will be a number of years before we can implement this phase 1, and we're working with UP on that. But really, once again, thank you for the leadership of you all to work as a mega region, and it's paying off. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate your comments and your hard work. All right, anyone else? Public or directors? All right, well, thank you very much. And it looks like, well, anything else on this, Dustin?
Yeah, just real quick, just want to provide some upcoming discretionary funding opportunities. They're listed here. And that's really it.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for your work this year.
All right, we're going to move to looking ahead at 2024. I can't believe that we're thinking about that already. But so since this is the last year of our meetings for 2023, we've got to do a little bit of business for the board, which is basically rotating the chair and vice chair duties to San Joaquin COG, and MTC respectively. So I'm going to pass this along to Diane Nguyen, who's the executive director of San Joaquin COG, to discuss her plans for leading the working group this next year in 2024.
Thank you, Chair Gore and Executive Director Corliss, for your leadership this year of 2023. You've set the bar high, and we hope we can meet and exceed that bar as the San Joaquin Council of Governments leadership in 2024. There are 4 main things that the executive directors and team huddled with in terms of the look ahead. And I wanted to give a quick highlight of those 4 areas, understanding that this mega region group has always been one to pivot and be responsive to emerging things that may happen throughout the year. But the 4 things we did highlight are a segue from Dustin's previous presentation, continued support for the Megaregion Dozen Action Plan. What this presentation earlier showed is the power of the partnership in project delivery. So that will continue. The programming strike team will continue to collaborate its technical leadership and pursue things together and fortify efforts on strategic funding partnerships. Hopefully we'll have the same practice like this year, where we update the list to maintain the dozen, the project of 12, but be able to add and replace projects as they get fully funded and are delivered. That would be something I will say that exceeds the vision that San Joaquin COG had when it brought the idea of the Megaregion Dozen to the Megaregion group. I also want to place in your ear the possibility of continuing the momentum of a Sacramento Lobby Day. Executive Director Corliss and the Megaregion group led this past year. And one of the big takeaways was how many of the state officials and representatives we met with continuously talked about the Megaregion collaboration and the fact that our agencies were working together in this first-time lobbying effort. So I hope that maybe one of the 3 meetings that the Megaregion Dozen Group has in the coming year could be substituted for a lobby day. The second area is coordinated and cross-disciplinary planning. I'm a firm believer that the foundation of excellent project delivery begins with cross-disciplinary planning. And the fact that AB 350 is on the governor's desk will highlight and be a milestone for this advancement of planning among the Megaregion. The third topic would be the continuation of this discussion on electric vehicles, electrification, alternative fuels, hydrogen, zero emission throughout the coming year. We'd like to hear more about the progress SACOG will be making on the SACOG-led Megaregion zero emission heavy duty study. Finally, a fourth topic that our team has looked at is roadway pricing. MTC has done a lot in that space, and I expect as early as the January meeting, we'll hear more from MTC on this topic. Now, we do recognize that roadway pricing has different levels in terms of depth and reach among our Megaregion partners. All of us have different degrees of experience in that space, but it is a common topic for Megaregion commuters, and it is a Megaregion issue. So we look forward to discussions of roadway pricing at future Megaregion meetings. So that closes kind of a brainstorm of topics for year 2024 on behalf of the SJCOG Megaregion board members. If I'm still on, looks like I'm having computer problems. We welcome the baton and the leadership in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. Appreciate that very much. Any questions or feedback from directors on the items that Diane shared, some possible focus for 2024? I saw Gary do a thumbs up on another lobbying day at the state capitol, which I do think is a very good idea. It allows us to connect personally with one another and continue to get our word out there about our projects and how we want to support one another. Anything else on this item? And then I want to make sure I open it up to the public if there's any public comments on this item.
So just to add strong support for continuing the Megaregion Dozen, I think that branding's great. And as we've seen, I think it's very successful when we all can get behind a group of projects. So.
Thank you, Director Bradford. All right. Great. Well, then we are going to move to the next item, which is the item to formally rotate the Megaregion Working Group Chair and Vice Chair to the SJCOG and MTC respectively. So with that, let's see, I'm looking at this going, we need to do it, right? I don't think there's any questions about that, us passing the baton to those groups. All right, I'll open it to the public. Any public comment on that item? And seeing none, then I would like to have somebody make a motion for us to do so.
Joiner moves approval.
Supervisor Rick, I'll second it.
And okay, by Director Joyner and then Director Rickman. Thank you. And then I'm guessing we need to take a roll call, Renee?
We do, yes, yes.
Or
Okay.
yeah, roll call vote.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mayor Carol Dutra-Bernacci.
Aye.
Supervisor Federal D. Glover. Absent Supervisor Nate Miley. Absent, and then Jim Sparing representing Solana County and cities.
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Supervisor Robert Rickman.
Yes.
Mayor Gary Singh.
Yes.
Mayor Nancy Young.
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Leo Zuber.
Yes.
And then Chair Gore.
Yes.
Supervisor Gary Bradford.
Yes.
Mayor Paul Joyner.
Yes.
Councilmember Mike Kozlowski.
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
We actually have Supervisor Miley here.
Yes, I'm here. And
Oh,
it's a
thank you.
yes.
Thank you so much. I will note that for our record.
Right, thank you. All right. And then as we think about 2024, we do have dates for the meetings in 2024 this time. I believe they are, you can click into your agenda there, but the next one, well, we've got 3 sets. So January 26th, April 26th, September 27th, and know that there are probably, if we have a lobbying day, something will change around there. So those are the proposed dates. Mark your calendars, please, so that we can have participation. And do we need to approve this item, the schedule for next year?
I believe we do need to approve.
Okay, so may I have a motion to do so, approve this calendar for next year?
Bradford will move.
Director Spearing, I think I heard, so we'll go with Bradford and Spearing. Thank you. Renee, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Mayor Carol Dutra-Bernacci.
Aye.
Supervisor Federal D. Glover. Absent. Supervisor Nate Miley.
Yes.
And Jim Sparing representing Solana County and cities.
Yes.
Representative Supervisor Robert Rickman.
Yes.
Mayor Gary Singh. Mayor Gary Singh, can you indicate your vote?
Yes. Sorry, didn't hear.
Sorry, no, I can see Mayor Nancy Young. I think she's having a little bit of audio problems there.
Yes, I was trying to push the button.
That's okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And then Vice Mayor Leo Zuber.
Yes.
Chair Gore.
Yes.
Supervisor Gary Bradford.
Yes.
Mayor Paul Joyner.
Yes.
And Councilmember Mike Kozlowski.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And next order of business is public comment. So do we have any additional public comment on an item that's not on our agenda or hasn't already been addressed? Any public comment?
We do not have any public comment.
All right. Great.
I'll
Then
throw in some public comment here.
Okay, feel
What's
free.
up with that shirt?
Who's he talking about?
Mike Kozlowski. Look at that
Yeah,
shirt.
so this was our community service day volunteer shirt this year. We had almost 2,000 of my neighbors and I were out doing service projects last 2 Saturdays ago. And that was everybody who was in charge of a project got one of these. Everybody else got a nice blue one.
I thought maybe there was a Dead concert I didn't know about.
I like your community pride, Mike. Great. All right. Well, thank you. No other public comment. Then I'm going to turn this briefly over to James Corliss with SACOG just for a couple of updates. Actually, an important update about AB 350.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair Gore. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to Chair Gore, particularly for leading us through this year. Really been a pleasure to lead the Megaregion working group. I think it was a great meeting to end on here with the lobby day and passing the baton over to the very capable my peer Diane over at San Joaquin COG and all of her ideas. When we started or sort of revived in some ways this group because Zoom and remote meetings allowed us to do that, being sort of spread geographically. One of the topics that we spent a bit of time on, perhaps for some of you too much time, we spent several meetings on what would it take to line up our plans? How could we actually have a planning process among our 3 agencies in the entire Northern California region so that we could better honestly see and plan for travel across our borders? And the conclusion was it would take a lot. It would take running state legislation. Well, fast forward to 2023, and for various reasons, we had to run state legislation this year. Assembly Bill 350 by Assemblymember Argyr Curry. She's a former SACOG board member, SACOG board chair, and also covers 2 of our 3 regions just in her assembly district. It is to push extend our timeline of our long-range plan back to an adoption date of the fall of 2025. That would line us up with the MTC planning cycle and get us 1 year off, not just San Joaquin COG, but all the Valley COGs, right, Diane? This has, for those of you, especially in the SACOG board, been quite the Herculean effort. Nothing is easy. We are on the governor's desk. We got out of the assembly 74-0. Thank you for everybody's efforts on this. We're really showing some real strong support. The governor still has not signed it. And so I would just make the plea if you all or your agencies, I think we all have all the 3 MPOs obviously in full support, but let us know. There's always time to get a support letter in, but we're hoping to enter in that bill. We're hoping to line up our plans. We have to take a lot of amendments in order to do that. But first and foremost, it's going to be an important thing to line up our plans. We hope we can permanently keep that schedule. We have to come back and do another amendment in a later year. But also really it's really important for us to be doing the engagement and the outreach and the involvement of a lot of our stakeholders to try to get to achieve a lot of our goals, part of which are going to be state greenhouse gas reduction goals related to what you heard this afternoon, but also frankly to get a plan that really extends another 10 years out and really encompasses our region and our vision and our values and our investment priorities. And then we do want to do quite a bit of work with our partners here through the Megaregion to look at that border traffic, to look at that planning across borders, and to better understand what the infrastructure investments we'll need over the next 25 years is to anyway. AB 350. Thank you all again for all of your support. It really does connect back to the 2020 discussion we had on lining up our plans. We did it. We've got a bill, and now we just need the governor to sign it. So with that, I would just also echo, as it has been all afternoon here, but when we've taken the Megaregion project list back to DC and we've done what we call our cap to cap lobby days of all the things we give people, the materials, and it is the Megaregion dozen. It is the map to which people usually say, what's the mandate that's requiring you to work together? And we say there is none. It's called the future of the Northern California Megaregion. And we're doing this because we have to, and we want to coordinate. And I think that really it honestly takes a lot of our delegation, a lot of the administration officials. I know FRA, who was at the event this morning on the third track. It's a big deal. It really does matter. It resonates with a lot of our state but federal partners as well. So congrats, everybody. Look forward to next year, and let's hope the governor puts his signature on AB 350 in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you, James, very much. Appreciate that. And with that, if there is no other business for today, then we will adjourn until our next meeting, which will be January 26th, 2024 at 12:30 p.m. All right. See you all soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chair Gore.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.